Lionel Messi risked his entire career for a cookie. Messi is one of the greatest football players of all time. He became a starting player for FC Barcelona at 17 years old, and by age 20, he was one of the best players in the world. But at the height of his career, something strange started to happen. He vomited during a match. Not just once, but over and over and over again. The rumors started to run wild, many people saying that he was sick. He tried to play it off, but eventually he went to the doctors and they discovered the truth. Messi had a terrible diet. He apparently liked to binge chocolates and chug sodas before his matches. He even had a special love for Argentinian cookies called alfajores. Eventually, he quit the junk food and consulted with a nutritionist who helped him create a more sustainable diet for a world-class athlete. This is the worst punishment in history. It doesn't physically harm you, but it does mentally. It's called the Chinese water torture. They tie up your arms and legs so you can't move, then they place a water bucket over your head, and at the bottom of the bucket, there's a tiny hole that releases drops of water onto their forehead every few seconds. While it doesn't sound so bad, just imagine doing this for weeks non-stop. The dumbest lottery winners. After winning $1.3 million in the California lottery, Dennis Rossi filed for divorce from Thomas Rossi so she wouldn't have to share the money with him. Thomas decided to sue her for violating state law and he kept all the money. Michael Carroll won $14 million when he was just 19. After claiming he wouldn't spend the money on dumb things, he bought multiple luxury cars, mansions, and other expensive things. To this day, he lost all his money and works at a cookie factory. Jack Whitaker won $315 million in the US lottery. When he claimed it, he took it all in cash. However, thieves broke into his house and took millions of dollars. These are the most expensive movies ever made. Because of the success of the Avengers franchise, DC Comics spent $300 million making Justice League in 2017. The budget for the Fast and Furious franchise exploded over the years. The last movie, Fast and Furious X, released in 2023, cost $340 million to make, and they only made a small profit. Avengers Age of Ultron is the most expensive Marvel movie ever. It had a budget of $365 million, which was more than Infinity War and Endgame. Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom had a budget of $432 million. And even though the movie received mixed reviews, it still made over $1 billion. And the most expensive movie ever is 2015 Star Wars The Force Awakens. The budget was $447 million, and it was well worth it because it was estimated to make over $2 billion. The most wanted people in the world. Eugene Palmer is wanted for supposedly shooting and killing his daughter-in-law in 2012. His ex had filed a restraining order against his son, which made him mad. For giving him up or providing information to find him, the FBI is offering a reward of up to $100,000. Mexican drug trafficker Rafael Cuero Quintero was arrested by the DEA. He spent 28 years in prison until he was released in 2013. But in 2015, he was convicted of murder and is currently considered a fugitive from justice. The reward for his capture is $20 million. Robert William Fisher made the FBI's top 10 most wanted list for murdering his wife and 2 kids, then exploding their house in 2001. 10 common misconceptions corrected. Napoleon was 5'7", which was slightly above average at that time. Chameleons don't change color to camouflage themselves. They usually do it to regulate body temperature. Humans don't only use 10% of our brains. Shaving doesn't cause hair to grow back thicker. If you swallow a piece of gum, it won't sit in your stomach for 7 years. No one was ever burned during the Salem witch trials. There is no significant evidence to drinking 8 glasses of water per day. The Declaration of Independence was not signed on July 4th, 1776. It was signed on August 2nd, 1776. Humans have more than 5 senses, including balance and thermoception. Hair and fingernails don't keep growing after death, but it might seem that way because the skin around them recedes. Cartoon houses that exist in real life. You can visit SpongeBob's house without having to dive into the sea. At the Nickelodeon Resort in Punta Cana, there's a very similar replica of the cartoon's house, and it even has a life-size version of Gary. The Flintstones house was also made in real life. It's located in California and costs $4 million. In Nevada, there's a life-size replica of the Simpsons house. To build the house with all the details from the cartoon, the production company 20th Century Fox spent $120,000, and they had the great idea to give it away in a competition. But in the end, the winner of the competition preferred $75,000 instead of the house. Bizarre things found in people's backyard. A man found a dinosaur bone that was 250 million years old. A couple who bought a house in California found an anti-nuclear bunker from the 1960s. It was built during the Cold War and was 4 meters underground for radiation protection. One man found human bones while doing yard work. He took them for examination and they were determined to be bones from 1,000 years ago. A man digging came across a passageway that led to the pyramids of Egypt. He dug around 30 feet down the tunnel, and archaeologists confirmed that it was a tunnel leading to Egypt's oldest pyramid. In In Iowa, a family found a mammoth femur in 2010. He kept it for 16 years until it was finally examined in 2013. Scientists determined that the bone was approximately 12,000 years old and belonged to a woolly mammoth. Are you a good liar? Well, take this test to find out. This is an exercise designed by Professor Richard Wiseman of the University of Hertfordshire. Start by extending your pointer finger on your dominant hand. Now, take 5 seconds to draw a capital Q on your forehead with your finger. If you drew your Q with the tail pointing on the left side of your forehead, that means you drew it so the people facing you could read it, which means you're more aware of how people see you, you like attention, and according to Professor Wiseman, you're a good liar. If you drew the Q with the tail on the right side of your head, that means you drew it so you yourself could read it. So you tend to be more introverted and bad at lying. Or you're like me, you just drew a circle and randomly put it on one side because you knew a Q has a tail and you didn't care about who's looking at you or who you're looking at. Yeah. If you find an envelope in your car, throw it out without opening it. So let's say you open your door and there's an envelope on your seat that wasn't there before and you decide to open it. It obviously won't always be this scam, but if it is, it'll be a letter pretending to be your car's security advisors. They'll claim that your car has vulnerability in the alarm system and they'll leave their information at the bottom requesting that you pay them in order for them to give you tips on how to fix it. But the truth is, they're nothing more than thieves. What they do is they use a master key that ruins your car's alarm system. Then they leave this letter so you phone them, then pay them, but they don't do anything after that. They won't give you any tips on how to fix it, they'll just take your money. So the best thing to do is call the police and report what happened. Some easy things to do to try and prevent anything bad like this from happening is parking your vehicle in the open, so if thieves try to do something like this, people can see them. But most importantly, always lock your vehicle and make sure that your alarm system is working properly. The luckiest people who survived the impossible. Satomi Yamaguchi is the only person recognized by the Japanese government to survive the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But unfortunately, he died at the age of 93 after complications from the radiation which he was exposed to. Eric Nurse was scuba diving when he found a cave 10 meters deep, which he didn't realize was the mouth of a great white shark. His head, shoulder, and arm were caught by the animal. After a 2-minute struggle, Eric stabbed the shark in the eye several times with a knife and it eventually let him go. Roy Sullivan was a US park ranger who was struck by lightning 7 times and survived. The first time he was struck in the foot, the second in his eyebrow, the third in his shoulder, and the fourth in the chest and stomach. 5 people who won the food lottery. This person got a massive fry the same size as the bag. This person got a strawberry the size of their palm. This person found a smaller grape in the grape that they were eating. This person got 4 chips linked together. Now before I tell you the craziest one about this Sour Patch Kid, I found this app that lets you prank your friends and family by changing their text messages. Just press the link in the comments to get it. Finally, this person found the King Sour Patch Kid. Pranks that backfired. This YouTuber likes to prank people on the street, like complimenting them on their shoes before stepping on them. But what a surprise, people don't really like it when this happens. Because of this, the YouTuber has been attacked multiple times. These guys place a fake turd on top of a luxury car, but when the owner of the vehicle notices this and runs out, he tases them. What the fuck? This kid calls 911 and tries to order a pizza. Dispatch keeps him on the phone to try and see if he needs medical attention, then hangs up when she realizes this is a prank. The kid decides to call 911 again, and this time he says he needs help with his computer. But after the second call, he gets a surprise when the police actually show up at his door. Finally, these guys crash a college lecture dressed as characters from Dragon Ball Z, but when one of them tries to throw a spirit bomb across the room, it hits a light on the ceiling which crashes down onto a student's tablet. Dark secrets that zoos don't want you to know. Zoo pens are a possible source of salmonella, E. coli, and many other diseases, so be careful when touching the animals. Some animals can suffer from zoonosis, which they get from being held in a zoo that causes them to tick, groom excessively, and make them anxious. And to control it, they give them medication. When zoos have too many animals in very little space, they give them pills to prevent them from having babies, or they sacrifice them at birth. The food given to animals isn't always the best. In many cases, they're given processed foods, and animals like tigers who only eat meat develop dental problems and become anxious because they can't hunt. Finally, it's 50 times more expensive to keep an elephant in a zoo than to let it run free. Dark secrets you didn't know about SeaWorld. SeaWorld is home to orcas who were kidnapped from the ocean, but the stories they tell about their captures are way different from what actually happened. For example, one of the stories they tell is that one of the orcas, which they named Tillicum, was rescued when she was 2 years old because she was injured in the ocean. But the truth is that she was taken away from her natural habitat against her will and given to SeaWorld for exhibition. The dolphins in the park suffer from stress caused by the contact they have with humans, which prevents them from feeding, resting, and taking care of their babies. Even though this information is supported by studies done at the University of Newcastle, they continue to let the public touch them. Finally, all the animals suffer from terrible consequences from overcrowding and unnatural living conditions. For example, the whales live in spaces that would be equivalent to us living in a bathtub, which doesn't allow them to swim enough to stay healthy, and you could tell by their collapsed dorsal fins. But SeaWorld claims that it's a natural condition. Secret rooms that people found in their house. Ohio University students thought their house was haunted because their closets kept opening and they were hearing noises. After looking around, they found a room in their basement that that led to a secret closet. They found a bed, books, and photographs that belonged to a stranger that was living there that they didn't know. A Reddit user shared a picture of a passageway in their new house. When he entered, he found a locked door that led to a secret room. Inside, he found a briefcase and a safe that had money, watches, and the most terrifying thing was a videotape saying the words "no, no, no." The tape was turned over to the police to try and solve the mystery. Finally, a man noticed some unusual boards in his basement, so he tried moving them and he found a room in his house that he had no clue existed. Inside, it was filled with ammunition and empty gun cases. There was even a grenade, but it was thankfully confirmed to be a dud. 5 everyday things that prove our life is a lie. Mini carrots sold in supermarkets aren't really that size. They're cut to look like that and more noticeable to the eye. Hair doesn't grow thicker if you cut it or shave it. Many people think this because the tip that's left is blunt, which makes it appear to be thicker until it's finished growing. The taste of Coca-Cola changes when it's packaged in cans. The only container that it doesn't change taste is in glass, because it's chemically inert, which means that it doesn't affect the product. The gold medals in the Olympics aren't only made of gold. They're made of pure silver that's plated in gold, so they only actually contain about 1.34% of gold, which would be equivalent to 6 grams. Finally, for the longest time, people have been using bricks for their walls because it's sturdy, but nowadays companies can make anything look like brick walls. So if it looks like this, it may not be as sturdy as you think. People with real superpowers. Tim Cridlin feels no physical pain whatsoever. He doesn't feel needles in his skin, he doesn't feel high and low temperatures, and basically anything else a normal person would feel. Gino Martino, or better known as Hammerhead, has the ability to break concrete block, iron bars, and baseball hats with his head, and he even showed that he could drop a bowling ball from 5 meters and land on his head. Natalia Demkina has extraordinary vision. Her eyesight allows her to see everything that normal people could see, but she also has X-ray vision, so she could identify diseases just by looking at a person. Raj Mohan Nair can endure an electrical shock with the force of a few amperes, and to give you an example, a normal person can only endure a few milliamps before dying. Finally, Liu Thao Lin is the Magnet Man. He can attract metal objects to his body, and he can hold up to 80 pounds of items. Apparently, it's a sticky property in his skin, and is an ability that may be hereditary. Facts you think are lies but are actually true. The Italian term spaghetti, used to name a type of pasta, is plural, and if you want to refer to a single piece of pasta in a package, the correct term is spaghettio. Columbus Day is celebrated in the United States on the second Monday of October. But the truth is, Columbus never set foot in the United States. Man stepped on the moon before wheeled suitcases were made. Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon in 1969, and suitcases with wheels were created in 1972. Clouds in the sky may look really light, but depending on the size, they weigh about a ton. The military uses dogs to detect bombs, thanks to their scenting abilities, which is really useful for ground operations. But what many people don't know is that the Navy trains and uses dolphins to detect bombs at sea and even attack enemy ships. How the most famous magic tricks were performed. The secret to the classic trick where a woman's cut in half by a saw is to use a box divided in 2 parts. The woman lies down in one box and fake feet come out the other box. To swallow the sword without getting hurt, the magicians place their head up to align their throat and stomach. This way the sword enters in a straight line and doesn't touch anything. The guillotine is one of the most dangerous and famous tricks out there. The secret so that nothing goes wrong is that the bottom of the guillotine has hidden compartments and blocks to stop the blade before it reaches the person's neck. To perform the trick where one magician lies with his back towards the wheels of a truck and the other magician drives over him, all the weight of the truck is on the opposite side of the magician, so he doesn't really feel that much pain. 5 things you didn't know 5 seconds ago. The largest tire manufacturer in the world is actually Lego. In 2011, they produced a record 380 million tires. They also have a secret room at their headquarters called Memory Lane, where they store at least one set of every Lego model ever made. The reason why there's black lines on the side of school buses is because it's made of a really strong metal, so it protects the bus if it got into an accident. The reason why you could remove headrests in vehicle is because if you're ever stuck inside and you can't roll down the window, for example if you're underwater, then you could use the metal prong to break open the window and get out. The original reason why bubble wrap was made was to create a cool looking wallpaper for bedrooms, but over time they realized that everyone was using it to wrap things in, so that's where they focused their attention on. Finally, the reason why cats need isn't because they're trying to find a comfy spot, but it's how they show affection. If the first thing you do after you wake up in the morning is grab your phone, then watch this video. When you grab your phone first thing in the morning, it makes you stay in bed scrolling on what you missed while you were asleep, instead of using this time to get a good start to your present day. Next, you'll want to make your bed, and I know lots of people think this is dumb because they're just gonna go back in it later that night, but when you make your bed in the morning, it gives you your first accomplishment of the day, which makes you feel better and want to do another one. Next, you can either have something to eat or skip this part if you're not hungry in the mornings, but just try not to eat anything sugary. By doing some sort of exercise in the morning, it wakes your body up, and I don't mean you have to run a marathon. Even just doing a few stretches loosens up your body and makes it feel better for the day. Next, it's time to meditate. Just close your eyes for 10 to 15 minutes and focus on your breathing. Over 50% of billionaires meditate in the morning. And lastly, write down 3 things that you want to accomplish in that day. It will make you focus on doing those 3 things rather than doing things that aren't productive. Obviously, you don't have to do everything I just said, but if you're looking for a better morning routine, then this is a good way to start. 3 people who beat the system part 2. A man from Turkey was banned from his hometown soccer stadium for a year, but he said there was a match that was really important. So he had to go to the police station to sign a paper to show that he wouldn't be allowed to watch the game in the stadium. Then right after, he quickly went to rent a crane. It only cost him $86 and he even led the crowd in a chant. A girl's phone was about to die, so she yelled at her mom upstairs to bring her down a charger. The mom decided to put the charger around the dog and told her daughter to call the dog downstairs. Now before I tell you about the smartest kid, I found this app that lets you prank your friends and family by changing their text messages. Just press the link in the comments to get it. Finally, this girl was playing on the computer and didn't want her mom to shut it off. So she placed Legos all over the floor because we all know that it's the most painful thing in the world. 3 places you should never swim. One of the rivers that you should never set foot in is Bubbly Creek, located in Chicago. In the 1900s, American meatpacking companies drained their waste into this creek, which caused really toxic fumes due to the decomposition of animal organs and blood. Not even a fish could survive in this creek. In Thailand, there's one area that causes concern called the Sa Mason Hole. It's a really deep underwater cave, which causes bad visibility for whoever swims there. So unless you want to get lost in the sea, I don't recommend swimming there. The last place is called the Amazon Basin in South America. It's drained by the Amazon River and has lots of predatory animals, like caimans, barracudas, piranhas, and deadly candiru fish, which is attracted by urine and can get into your urinary tract and cause a lot of pain. Miracles people claim to have caught on tape. On Route 385 in Memphis, Tennessee, a driver lost control of his Jeep and went off the road. The car was immediately engulfed with flames. The driver escaped unharmed, but the curious thing is the police found a Bible that was untouched by the fire. It was perfectly fine even though the car was almost in ashes. In the Philippines, a little girl woke up at her funeral. Apparently she was ill and had a high fever which caused her to go into a coma, but the doctors didn't know that and declared her dead the day before her funeral. But luckily her relatives found out in time. Prahlad Yani was a Hindu ascetic who claimed he hadn't eaten or drank anything in over 70 years. Specialists in the scientific department put him in hospital for 15 days under 24-hour supervision and claimed he hadn't eaten or drank anything in those 15 days. According to the man, this can be achieved by meditation and a divine blessing. 5 times quick reflexes save the day. This dad risked his own life to run out in front of a car to save his daughter. This little girl is helping her parents in the kitchen when the urge to sneeze kicks in. Luckily, dad is there with his hand to protect the food. This bus driver's quick reaction saves a kid from walking in front of a car.
That was a good grab.
A person in the crowd steps in at the last moment to save this guy doing stunts from landing on a rock. Finally, this birthday party was about to be ruined, but this absolute hero stepped in to save the day. This man has saved 2.4 million lives by donating his blood. James Harrison is an 81-year-old man living in Australia. When Harrison was 14 years old, he underwent major chest surgery and depended on blood donations to survive. So after the surgery, he decided to start donating his own blood when he was 18. Harrison started donating in 1954, and after the first few, doctors discovered that his blood contained rare antibodies that could help treat babies with certain diseases. So Harrison committed to being a regular donor, and over the next 57 years, he donated blood plasma every few weeks, which amounted to 1,173 donations in total. According to the Australian Red Cross, Harrison's donations saved the lives of 2.4 million babies. In 2018, he turned 81, and in compliance with Australian policy, he had to retire from plasma donation. But Harrison is still known as the man with the golden arm. The 5 most unusual prisons. In Bolivia's San Pedro prison, each prisoner has to pay for their cell. Each one is between $1,000 and $1,500. And to get the money, they have to work. That's why the prison is full of restaurants and small markets. In Norway, there's an eco-friendly prison. Everything is recycled, solar panels are used, and most of the food is produced. The prison actually looks more like a summer camp because you could play tennis, swim, and go horseback riding. The Alcatraz prison was a small island in San Francisco. It's almost impossible to escape because you would have to go through concrete walls, the rocky coastline, and swim through the freezing cold water. In Cebu prison in the Philippines, prisoners dance as part of their exercise program, and there's actually a viral video where they dance to Michael Jackson's Thriller. Finally, there's a prison in Austria that holds prisoners who don't require maximum security. The prisoners even wear their own clothes, cook their own food, and live a fairly normal life. Secrets hotels don't want you to know. The free breakfast they offer isn't really free. The cost of the breakfast is included in the room's rate. The people who work in housekeeping only straighten the sheets and arrange the pillows. They only wash them if there's a visible stain. Booking a room is more expensive at night because that's when most people are looking for reservations. The ideal time to call the hotel is between 5 and 6 p.m. because at night they increase their prices because they know there's not many other options. Tipping the staff can give you a lot of benefits, such as deeper cleaning in your room, a special treatment, improvements in your room, and in general better service. 5-star hotels know your social status before you arrive and will give more attention to famous or wealthy people. And lastly, everything is negotiable. Hotels will always be open to negotiating a few things so you stay and leave a high review. Here's why you should never touch a dead whale. The blue whale is the largest animal on the planet and can reach 29 meters in length. The weight of this animal is 180 tons, which is equivalent to 33 elephants. And although everyone would be attracted if they see one, it's best to stay far away if you see a dead whale due to health reasons. If you touch a dead whale with wounds, you can be infected with viruses or bacteria. And if you're exposed to the gases that it releases for too long, it can cause you to faint. Also, when a whale dies, it decomposes and generates many internal gases that can cause it to explode at any second. When that happens, the whale pieces can fly at a speed of 80 kilometers per hour for up to 70 meters around it. That's why they have to create holes in a dead whale so that it releases as many gases as possible so it doesn't explode. 5 people who won the food lottery, part 12. This person got a banana the size of their forearm. This person got a lemon way bigger than their hand. This person found a pearl in the oyster that they were eating. This person grew a carrot that looks like a hand. Finally, this person found a wizard in their pack of gummy bears. 5 moments of pure luck. It's a miracle that this dog didn't get hit when it ran in front of a vehicle. This little girl ran across the street after getting off of the bus and she just barely avoids being hit by a car. A massive telephone pole falls over and crushes a car, but amazingly, the driver was unharmed. This kid rode his bike past a house having a tree cut down and just barely avoided it. This motorcyclist hits his brakes at the perfect time to just barely be avoided by getting T-boned by a Jeep who ran a red light. This bouncy house flew away with 3 kids inside of it, and you won't believe what happened to them. Johnny was a friendly man living in New York. One day, he decided to set up a large bouncy house in his front yard for the neighborhood kids to enjoy. But when he was setting it up, he forgot to put in the stakes to hold it to the ground. And one day, 3 kids were playing inside the bouncy house when the wind began to pick up. And just when the kids were about to get off of it, it flew 50 feet up into the air. Johnny quickly ran outside and he saw it flying higher and farther away. A man in a nearby apartment saw it flying in the air, so he called the police. The police then began chasing it, hoping the wind would die down and they would land in the river. A few minutes later, the wind changed direction and they were headed straight towards an electric tower. One of the kids then fell out and landed on a parked car. But just as they began to lose hope, the wind started to die down and they started falling to the ground. When they got close enough to the ground, the other 2 kids jumped out onto the concrete. Luckily, all 3 kids survived with just scratches and bruises, and Johnny was never charged. This man sold a fake airport for $242 million. His name is Emmanuel Nwudi, and he's a former director at Union Bank of Nigeria. In 2015, Nwudi pulled off this scam by impersonating the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. He called the director of a bank in Brazil and asked him to invest in a new airport that would be in the capital of Nigeria. Surprisingly, the director agreed without ever verifying Nwudi's identity or even visiting the site where the airport would be built. Over the next 3 years, the Brazilian bank invested $242 million to a non-existent airport, and $191 million of that was paid in cash. The scam was only discovered when a Spanish bank wanted to buy the Brazilian bank, because the board wanted to know why such a large amount of money was tied up in the investment. This led to a criminal investigation, and eventually, Nwudi was arrested. The most respectful moments in sports. During a match, Cristiano Ronaldo broke a fan's nose from kicking the ball, but at the end of the match, he looked for the fan to check on him and also ended up giving him one of his shirts. Matthias Steiner, who was a weightlifter, was determined to win an Olympic gold medal after his wife passed away. During the 2008 Beijing Olympics, he ended up winning gold, and on the podium he posed with a medal and a picture of his wife. During a marathon where 2 brothers were competing from Great Britain, one of them stopped near the end because he was too tired. His brother, who was a few meters behind him, took him by his arm and helped him cross the finish line in first place. People versus nature. When this little girl tries to open her front door, the wind blows the door open and takes her with it. These cyclists were enjoying a ride when all of a sudden a huge tree branch falls and takes them out. People at this wedding were enjoying a beautiful outside reception in Hawaii when all of a sudden a big wave literally comes and crashes the party. Plastic umbrellas are no match for a windy day in Istanbul. And finally, this man decided to skate shirtless across a frozen canal in Amsterdam when the ice suddenly broke and he fell into the water. The most heartwarming judge verdicts. This family was in court for supposedly going 35 miles per hour in a 20 zone, and this is what they had to say.
Well, I didn't feel like we were, exceeding too much over the limit.
Not too much.
No.
Just a little.
Yeah, just a little. I didn't.
No, she.
Now we found the honest one.
Then the judge brought up their son and asked him if his dad was speeding or not.
Guilty or not guilty? What do you say?
Guilty.
Guilty.
But in the end, the judge ended up letting the ticket go. As soon as the judge read why this lady got a ticket, he started laughing. She got a parking ticket for parking in a zone that you can only park in past 10 a.m. And guess what time she parked there at?
I think 9:59 is close enough to 10. Matters dismissed.
Thank you.
This man faked heart attacks for free food. A 55-year-old man living in Spain was recently arrested for faking heart attacks to get out of restaurants before paying the bill. Multiple reports claim that the man was dressed in designer clothes, posed as a Russian tourist, and spoke in a mix of a bunch of different languages. He always started his meal with a Russian salad, then he ordered multiple expensive dishes, like lobster and seafood paella. Then he washed it all down with a few glasses of whiskey. He dramatically clenched his chest and fell to the ground to avoid paying. He managed to get away with doing this 20 times, but after his most recent offense, the restaurant's manager called the police and the man was arrested. He spent 42 days in jail and will pay a minimal fine. The 5 coolest houses in the world. The transparent houses in Tokyo and consists of 3 floors with walls that are completely see-through. According to the people who built it, it was inspired by ancestors who lived in trees. In Hong Kong, there's a house that's 105 square meters with walls that move. Storage spaces unfold to create 24 individualized rooms. In Australia, there's a $700,000 house that's built on a turntable, and it makes a complete rotation every 30 minutes. In Malibu, California, there's the Skateboard House. It's a house designed by a former world champion skateboarder, and the inside consists of a large skate park. Finally, we have the Hobbit House in Wales. It was created by a photographer who's a fan of the movie The Lord of the Rings. The cost was $5,200 and only natural materials were used. This man accidentally donated $15,000 instead of $150 to a fundraiser. Earlier this year, a man known as Michael posted this story to Reddit. One day, Michael's neighbor told him about this fundraiser to support a hunger charity in Bangladesh. Michael decided he wanted to make a donation, so he went to the GoFundMe page and donated $150 USD, or so he thought. Just a few moments later, he got a message from his bank regarding a large transaction. That's when Michael realized he accidentally donated $15,041. He immediately contacted customer support, who issued a refund, but it would take 3 to 7 days to arrive. The next day, Michael woke up with over 40 messages on Facebook. They were all from people in Bangladesh thanking him for his donation. Michael was so touched by this that he decided to up his original donation of $150 to $1,500. Now, when Michael posted this story on Reddit, it went viral, and the GoFundMe page received a whole bunch of donations. It raised nearly $120,000 in total. Here's how to survive a dog attack. First, you need to stay calm and still. The reason dogs attack is because they're afraid, and they've learned that offense is their best defense. So if you yell or make lots of motion, you'll cause their fear to increase and they'll be more aggressive. The second thing is to avoid eye contact. When you stare, it scares them, and again causes them to be more aggressive. The third thing is to avoid running because it'll trigger them to chase you. Now, if you think it's gonna bite you, put a purse, jacket, or any object in between you and the dog. Then use it as a shield to prevent it from getting close to you. But if the bite's unavoidable, defend yourself with one of your forearms, and use your other arm to protect your face, throat, and stomach. Once the dog is calmed down, slowly back away without turning around. And finally, after the attack, go to the emergency room to check your injuries. People who had one job but still failed. This person put up a sign saying give cyclists space, but it blocks off the bike lane. This person gave the baker a flash drive with the picture they wanted on the cake, but instead the baker put a picture of the flash drive. On the news, they were supposed to blur out the people in the background's faces, but you could still see them perfectly fine in the mirror. This person's job is to cut the grass, but they're too lazy to move the pylon. Now, before I show you the most funniest one, I found an app that scans your palm and tells you your future. Just press the link in the comments to get it. Finally, this person put a drain in the only spot that doesn't get water, so I guess it's working, right? Dumb inventions that people actually use. The Hug Me pillow was designed for people who miss their partners. Its shape stimulates half of the upper back of a human and an arm to cuddle with. One of the
the sillier inventions that are actually really popular are cutters. They make cutters for avocados, strawberries, bananas, and even boiled eggs. The egg cracker has become really popular. It's a pretty simple machine. You just place the egg inside, press the device, and it cracks the shell. The toothpaste dispenser is something that lots of people didn't know they needed until it came out. You just put your toothbrush in the opening, a little bit of toothpaste comes out, and that's it. The ostrich pillow's design promises that you'll have a very comfortable nap. Basically, you just put your head inside the pillow, and depending on what position you're lying in, you could also put your hands inside. People who got stuck in the strangest places. Jamie Bracken Murphy was a young Irish boy who got stuck in a stuffed animal vending machine. He wanted to grab one of the toys, so he went in the machine, but couldn't get out. Thankfully, it was easy for them to get him out, and he was only in there for a couple minutes. A man named Cato Larson got stuck in a toilet while trying to get his friend's phone out. He didn't just reach his hand in, he went all the way in the toilet and he couldn't get out. He couldn't find his phone either to call for help. He stayed there for an hour until he was freed by firefighters, who had to break the toilet to get him out. Finally, a woman named Rosie decided to get into a washing machine for a TikTok, but her legs got stuck, so she had to call someone for help to get her out. She tried calling her friends first, but they couldn't, so she ended up having to get help from the fire department. Unique animals you won't believe exist. The chevrotain, also known as a mouse deer because of its appearance, is found in Southeast Asia and is one of the most smallest hoofed animals in the world, weighing only 2 pounds. The elephant shrew is found in Africa. It's called that because its nose looks like an elephant's trunk. The red and white flying squirrel, also known as the Chinese giant flying squirrel, is the world's largest squirrel, measuring over 3 feet. They can travel 65 feet during one flight. And finally, the star-nosed mole is a small animal known for having a nose with small tentacles that give an appearance of a star. These tentacles, known as Elmer's organs, are receptors that allow it to see and smell. Homeowners who spent a fortune just for revenge. A couple that was in the process of a divorce in the 1920s made an agreement where the husband had to build a house for her that was identical to the house they were living in, but she didn't specify the place where she wanted it. So the man had it built in a saltwater marsh that was in the middle of nowhere. In a Seattle neighborhood, neighbors got into an argument about a small plot of land. The owner of the land was approached by his neighbor, who offered him a small amount of money for the land so he could grow a garden. For some reason, the landowner was so offended that he built a house. In the end, the neighbor moved because the house obstructed his view. In Argentina, Karina Cavana was rejected from her partner's mother, so in revenge, she set out to build a house that would obstruct the view of the Basilica of the Blessed Sacrament from the home of the family that rejected her. School trips that went horribly wrong. On a trip for the Cub Scouts to a beach in San Diego, the parents got an embarrassing surprise when they realized the beach was a nude beach. After the awkward encounter, the parents quickly returned the boys. In Indiana, a chemistry teacher wanted to connect with his students, so he invited them to his house to drink and smoke, and then he took them to the club. Then on the way home, they were pulled over for speeding. The teacher was then fired from his job. Finally, in Washington, a father was taking his daughter on a school trip when another father recognized him from being on the Washington's most wanted list. After a struggle with the police, the man escaped. However, after negotiations, the man turned himself in the same night. The most expensive things thrown away. J.K. Rowling, who wrote Harry Potter, gave an interviewer one of her books. He thought it would be a flop, so he threw it in the trash. Today, the first edition of the copy sells for over $80,000. In England, one of the machines used by the British government to decipher secret messages during World War II was thrown into a recycling plant. The machine is valued at $10,000 and is considered one of the most important pieces of history in the world. A woman in the US took her 1976 Apple I computer to a recycling center. Not too long later, the owners of the center auctioned the computer for $200,000, but they're now trying to find the former owner to share the money with. James Howell lost 7,500 bitcoins in 2013 after losing the hard drive that he stored them on. At the time, one coin was $130, but today each coin is $40,000, meaning he lost over $300 million. April Fool pranks that went way too far. The sales assistant at a store called her boss and told him that the store was being robbed and she was being threatened. Within a few minutes, police cars and helicopters surrounded the store. When she said it was an April Fool's prank, she was arrested and fired from her job. A lady was arrested after calling her daughter and saying she was shot at her home. The daughter called the police, but when 20 police officers arrived, they realized that no one was there and it was just a bad joke. On a radio station in England, the DJ decided to make a joke, saying from the cliffs of Beachy Head, a ship very similar to the Titanic could be seen. Tons of people went to the cliff, causing a lot of traffic. A few days later, due to the traffic, a crack opened up the ground and it fell into the sea.
Classic movie moments that were actually improvised. Dustin Hoffman claims that he actually improvised the famous line, "I'm walking here," from Midnight Cowboy when a taxi drove through the scene.
I'm walking here! I'm walking here!
In Django Unchained, Leonardo DiCaprio accidentally sliced his hand open on a glass, but he continued with the scene, and that's actually what they used in the movie.
Hey! Lay your palms flat on that tabletop! If you lift those palms off that turtle shell tabletop, Mr. Pooch is gonna let loose with both.
In Dumb and Dumber, Jim Carrey improvised the most annoying sound in the world. You could see his partner in the scene, Jeff Daniels, break out laughing.
Hey, wanna hear the most annoying sound in the world?
And finally, in the film Taxi Driver, the script called for Robert De Niro's character to talk to himself in the mirror. This led him to improvise the famous "You talking to me" monologue.
You talking to me? You talking to me?
Tricks that cops don't want you to know. In lots of countries, police are allowed to tell lies, if necessary, to obtain information they believe may be relevant. You have the right to record as long as you're not under arrest. You can also ask for identification, and they can't force you to erase the video without a warrant. The requests an officer makes to you aren't an order. For example, if they don't have a warrant to search your car, then it's within your rights to refuse. But it's better to let them do it if you have nothing to hide, because you'll most likely be detained until they get a warrant. The best thing to do in dealing with the police is to act calmly, because if you're nervous or have a defensive attitude, it'll keep them on their toes and the situation may become more difficult. Finally, police officers may use false evidence to try and trick you into admitting the crime. For example, they may use a fake lie detector on a suspect to try and get them to admit or not admit the crime that they are being charged with. 3 people who beat the system. A lady from Vancouver spotted her stolen bike for sale online. She phoned the police, but they were busy that day and couldn't help her. So she decided to call the thief and say she was interested in buying the bike. They met at McDonald's and she immediately knew that it was hers. So she asked to try it out and he agreed and she never came back. Kimberly Oakley left a note for her son Jason saying, "Can you hang this out please?" But she didn't specify what this meant. So Jason took her words more serious than she thought he would and literally hung up the note and sent her this picture. Now before I tell you about the smartest kid, I found an app that gives you these secret emojis and also a bunch of cool fonts. Just press the link in the comments to get it. Finally, this kid's mom has simple rules. No food in the living room and no technology in the kitchen. So the boy beat the system by laying in between the two. Photos with disturbing backstories. This photo was taken in 1986, just before NASA sent these 7 explorers into space on the Space Shuttle Challenger. However, a few seconds before takeoff, the shuttle exploded and killed the explorers. To this day, it's unknown if Princess Diana died from an accident or if someone planned it. This photo was taken in Paris just before the crash that caused her death. In 2015, this plane from TransAsia Airways crashed in Taiwan minutes after this photo was taken. The plane was carrying 58 passengers and ended up crashing into the Keelung River. The pilot said he pulled back the throttle on the wrong side and accidentally shut off the only working engine. This error resulted in 43 deaths and 15 injuries. This photo was taken in Thailand in 2004, right before an earthquake caused a tsunami that reached 100 feet high, and more than 200,000 people died. Fake beggars who got caught. A man in Colombia pretended to have a leg injury so people would give him money. He collected about $200 from people driving by, but one day the police offered to help him with medical equipment, but he refused. So they looked into it and it turns out he was lying. A beggar in China pretended to have 2 legs amputated. He moved around in this little vehicle where he crawled with his hands. But one day a man took off his pants to expose him, and it turned out he had both legs. 5 years ago, a pregnant woman from America who begged for money every day on the streets with her child was caught after someone taking a picture of her driving a Mercedes-Benz, and while she counted the money with a smile on her face. The biggest things ever stolen. A tank from the California Army was stolen by an unemployed plumber in 1995. The man destroyed everything in his path as the police chased him for 20 minutes. A beach in Jamaica was stolen in 2008. Police still don't know who did it, but they took sand that corresponds to 500 truckloads of sand. A World War II fighter plane was stolen by an Air Force commander. He restored it and sold it for over $300,000. This 3,000-pound bell was stolen from a Buddhist temple. The bell was only used for special occasions and was priceless to the monks, but it was sold for $500 a year later. And believe it or not, people in Mahatma village in India stole a mountain peak. They worked 11 hours a day to cut the rock. They stole it then sold it so they could feed their families.
This diver found a freezing man alive in a sunken ship. Harrison is a cook from Nigeria who survived more than 60 hours underwater. The boat that he was on had an accident in the Atlantic Ocean and it turned upside down. The reason that he survived is thanks to an air bubble that formed in his cabin. It made it so that he could breathe underwater until he was found by someone. Everyone thought that no one had survived, so they sent rescue divers to retrieve the bodies. But they were all shocked because they didn't expect to see anything but corpses. The cook was at a depth of 30 meters underwater and he was the only survivor. But at the exact moment that he was found, he was almost without oxygen and he was almost frozen. In order to get him out, the divers used hot water to warm him up, then placed an oxygen mask on his face, then brought him to the surface.
The luckiest things found in storage units. A homeless couple looking for a couch bought a storage unit that had an old couch and a teddy bear for $10 because nobody else wanted it. But when they checked inside the bear, they found $300,000 in cash. A man from Long Island found a sports car in a storage unit that cost him $100. But that's not all. The car was from a James Bond movie and Elon Musk offered him $1 million for it. A couple who bought a storage unit found a 16th century pirate treasure chest. The chest was full of Spanish coins and the whole thing sold for $500,000. An art enthusiast bid $15,000 for some paint paintings to resell. Among the pile of 200 paintings, 5 of them were masterpieces that had been lost and they were worth $2.5 million. Why North Korea is the hardest country to escape. Since Kim Jong-un took power in North Korea, it's become harder and harder to cross the North Korean border. When his father was in charge, the number of people who crossed the border was higher because the border security was less tight. They could simply bribe the local border control and they would let them pass into China. But when Kim Jong-un realized this, he decided to tighten the security. And now the border patrol can shoot anyone that tries to cross the border. He also had an electric barbed wire fence installed across the border. There's lots of escape routes, but they're all really dangerous. If anyone manages to reach China, they'll have to stay in hiding because if they're found by the authorities, they'll be sent back to North Korea where they'll be accused of being spies. So instead they have to reach a country where they won't be deported, which is Thailand. When they arrive in Thailand, they must turn themselves in to the authorities to be transferred to that country. It can take them between 2 to 6 months to complete this escape, but the people who decide to do it prefer to take the risk rather than continue living in North Korea. The most brutal military drills. South Korea's elite army has to go into freezing water that's minus 30 degrees for training, and for 9 days they have to do combat training in the snow at extreme temperatures. In North Korea, the training's also brutal. One of their daily activities is to hit a piece of wood wrapped in rope 5,000 times and hit blocks of salt with their bleeding fists to make the muscles in their hands stronger. Part of the Chinese army training consists of wooden sticks being smashed on their backs, concrete blocks bursting in their arms, plates being broke over their heads, and being hit in the head and stomach with a hammer. Finally, military members from different countries have participated in this training exercise, where they have to drink snake blood and eat live animals. This training is a survival course for them to learn how to survive in extreme conditions. The worst school punishments. In 2011, a teacher from Albuquerque called the police because a student burped in class. The boy was then taken to juvenile prison for testing. Christopher Baker, who was a 9-year-old student from Kentucky, was put in a duffel bag for misbehaving in class. The school claimed that he was in the therapy bag for almost 20 minutes. Due to the mother's claims, the teachers involved were fired. At a school in New Jersey, a student accidentally spilled water on the lunchroom floor. When the assistant principal saw the incident, she forced 16 students to eat their lunch on the floor for 10 days. When the parents found out, they sued the school, winning $500,000. Finally, a 5-year-old from Pennsylvania received a 10-day suspension for wanting to shoot her Hello Kitty bubble gun at another student. She said, "I'll shoot you, you shoot me, and we'll play together." After the teacher heard the conversation, she sent her to the principal's office. And even though she just had a bubble gun, she was suspended for a terroristic threat. Athletes who were caught cheating. In 2012, it was confirmed that cyclist Lance Armstrong had used drugs throughout his career to enhance his performance. He received a lifetime ban and got his 7 Tour de France victories taken away. Tom Brady demanded that the balls being used in a game between the Patriots and the Indianapolis Colts were to be slightly inflated to gain an advantage. Although they won 45-7, Brady was fined $4 million and banned for 4 games. Ben Johnson cheated to win the 100-meter dash in the 1988 Olympics. A prohibited anabolic steroid was detected in his samples, for which he was banned for 2 years. A few years later, he tested positive again and was banned for life. Finally, in the 1986 World Cup, in a game between Argentina and England, Diego Maradona scored a goal with his hand, and the referee counted it despite the evidence.
This vehicle started slowly moving out into oncoming traffic in a busy intersection. Then you could see a lady get out of her vehicle and start running towards the car, and it was actually her coworker. When she got to the vehicle, she looked in the window and saw that the driver was unconscious, but she couldn't stop the vehicle by herself. She started waving her hands in the air to try and get people's attention to come and help her, and luckily some people started running over. One person, then another, then a third, a fourth, and a fifth all managed to stop the vehicle. They then tried to open the door to help the person, but it was locked. One of the ladies had a dumbbell in her vehicle, so she gave it to the man and he smashed open the back window. A bunch of people had already called 911, so they arrived. Apparently, the lady had taken medication on an empty stomach, which caused her to pass out while she was driving. This man shot someone to protect his chicken business. In the 1930s, Harlan Sanders worked as a manager at a Shell gas station in Kentucky. And to boost this business, he decided to start cooking food for travelers. His best seller was fried chicken. He decided to start painting signs all around town advertising his small kitchen. But when Matt Stewart, who's a competitor that also works at a gas station called Standard Oil, sees these signs, got upset because his competitor is using chicken to sell more oil. So he decided to paint over the signs with a thick tar-like substance. But when Sanders and his Shell employees catch him doing this, they decide to confront him. During this confrontation, Matt Stewart pulled out a gun and fired at them, killing one of the Shell employees. Sanders fired back, hitting Stewart in the shoulder. Stewart was charged with murder and sentenced to several years in prison. But Sanders got off free and went back to selling his chicken.
Genius inventions that should exist everywhere. Some elevators in Asia have giant buttons on the floor that you can kick to mark what floor you're going to. This was designed to help people who are carrying things and can't press the buttons with their hands. There's a mall that lets you leave your dog in a safe spot while you shop. The spot has a security system so that only you can open them, as well as lighting and air conditioning. In the United States, there's a shoe store that lets you test the shoes on different surfaces. The test box includes gravel, asphalt, and even materials like Lego. Finally, there's restaurants that give you a controller with 3 buttons. The first button lets the waiters know when you're ready to order, the second is to let them know when you're ready to pay, and the third one is to cancel your order. The idea is to avoid the waiters from constantly asking you if you're ready to order. Mysterious photos that can't be explained. In this photo, if you look behind this man's head, you can see a shadow behind him. The face of the shadow belongs to Air Force pilot Freddie Jackson, who had passed away and his funeral had taken place a few hours before. In this photo of students, you can see a hand that doesn't belong to any one of them. And although they thought it was a joke, many people think it was paranormal activity. This photo was taken on a bridge in Oakville, Kentucky. The shadow appears to be of a woman walking, and coincidentally, there's a story that a soldier murdered his wife and child near this location. After a family dinner, Mr. Cooper took this picture to remember. But when they looked at it, they seen a strange figure hanging from their ceiling. The 3 most dangerous airplane landings. On a Myanmar Airlines flight in 2019, the plane lost its front wheels, so they were unable to land. The pilot had to do circles around the landing area to burn fuel so it would slow down the plane and make it easier to land. The plane landed with the rear wheels first, then the nose of the plane hit the ground. Everyone remembers Sully after his emergency landing on the Hudson River. 2 geese collided with the engines of the plane to make them stop working, so the pilot had no choice but to try landing in the river, which he did successfully. At an airport in South Sudan, a plane carrying 43 people caught on fire after the wing collided with a car. What happened is the pilot couldn't see the runway because of the heavy fog, so he had to make a blind landing. But fortunately, all the passengers got off safely.
5 rare phobias you've never heard of, part 2. Xanthophobia is a fear of the color yellow, meaning people with this phobia are scared of things like bananas and school buses. Aerophobia is a fear of fresh air or a breeze. This phobia is a common symptom if you have rabies. Amathophobia is a fear of dust. Research found that this fear occasionally shows up in librarians. Somnophobia is the fear of initiating sleep. It's most common in people who experience sleep paralysis. Deipnophobia is the fear of eating with others. This can come from a fear of criticizing what other people think of you eating, or the fear of having to talk to other people while you're eating. This man has an unusual emotion support animal. Joey Henney recently made headlines when he tried to take his emotional support alligator to a Philadelphia Phillies game. He claimed that him and his alligator Wally got invited there to meet the players before the game, but the players were already warming up by the time he got there, so he decided to buy a ticket for the game, but Wally was denied entry because of their pet policy. But that didn't stop Wally from going around the outside of the park to greet its fans. Wally also has over 100,000 followers on TikTok. The man worked at a reptile rescue center for 30 years, helping injured animals recover and then returning them to the wild. He said he never intended on keeping any animals, especially an alligator, but Wally the alligator grew attached to him, so he decided to keep it. He said in all his years of handling alligators, Wally is the only one that doesn't bite.
Places on Earth that no human has set foot on. This place is the Island of Snakes. It's in Brazil and is only visited by Brazilian military and some scientific researchers. You're not allowed to go there because there's 1 to 5 snakes everywhere you step, and the golden snake, which is one of the most dangerous snakes in the world, lives there. Grankar Punsum is a mountain located in the Kingdom of Bhutan. It's over 7,000 meters in the air and has never been touched by a human and never will, because in 1994 climbing over 6,000 meters in the air was prohibited for religious reasons. And lastly, North Sentinel Island. The Indian government banned any contact with the island because of the aggressiveness from the people that live there. Recently, 2 fishermen decided to explore the island and they were killed by the people that live there.
Here's why they're called killer whales. No fatal attacks on humans have been documented in the ocean, but they're a huge threat to sea life. When you think of the top ocean predator, you probably think of the great white shark. But it's actually the killer whale because they have a diverse diet and they eat everything. They hunt in packs like wolves and eat everything from very small fish to big sharks. People who survived the impossible. In 2011, while bungee jumping on the Zambezi River in Zambia, Erin Langworthy suffered an accident that almost cost her her life. Right when she jumped, her bungee cord broke, which caused her to fall all the way into the river where she fought for her life for 40 minutes. Luckily, she only suffered bruises and a broken collarbone. Cecilia Secan was the only survivor of Northwest Airlines Flight 255 in 1987. Only half a mile away from the airport, the plane crashed due to a mechanical malfunction in the left wing. The doctors said they couldn't give an explanation explanation on how she survived, and she doesn't even remember what happened. She fractured some bones in her left leg and got burns on 30% of her body. This delivery driver saw the words "help us" on a package and ended up saving a life. A UPS driver became a real-life hero in 2016 when he rescued a mother and her son after finding that message on a package that he was delivering. James Jordan was holding his 3-year-old son and wife captive at their own house. He kept his son locked in a room without food or water for 15 hours a day, and he was also physically assaulting his wife. So the lady came up with a plan to escape. She wrote a message saying to call 911 on a package that she was sending off, hoping that someone would read it. The UPS driver saw the message and decided to call the police just in case it wasn't a prank. And because he did this, a SWAT team entered the house and rescued the mother and son. Jordan was then taken into custody and charged with multiple counts of assault.
Homeless people who won the lottery. Laszlo Andrzejczyk was an alcoholic from Hungary who lost everything. He was homeless for 7 years with hundreds of unpaid debts. But his luck changed when he bought a lottery ticket for just a few pennies. He won 636 million Hungarian guilders, which is equivalent to $2.5 million. A man living in his car from England bought a lottery ticket with his last few pennies. He put the ticket away, and 6 months after he bought it, he found out that he had won £250,000. A homeless man who lived in a tent won $50,000 after buying a ticket. Even though he could have bought a small house to live in, he chose to upgrade his tent and help his homeless friends by giving them each $100.